Welcome to 7 Investing Now, a show that teaches you how to take a long-term view on investing by better understanding what's happening in the market now.
Good afternoon, 7 Investors, and welcome to the Friday, the Memorial Day Friday edition of 7 Investing Now. My name, of course, is Dan Kline. I'm the host of the program, and I am here live. I'm going to be joined momentarily by Sam Bailey, our Director of Marketing, and then most of the show is going to be with Anirban Mahanti. We talked about Zscaler, the state of internet security, and whether Ford's going to go out of business because of their electric vehicle plans. It's maybe not that dire, but it is a little bit dire for the big American automaker. Sam Bailey, if you want to join me here, let's explain what we're doing. So here's what we're doing now. Over the course of the summer, I'm going to be traveling a lot. And I'm not always going to be traveling in places where we have good internet connections. So a lot of those are going to have chunks of the show that are taped with me doing live intros and taking your questions from exotic locales, with Sam having backup intros and outros in case something goes wrong with my introduction. I can't promise you that when I'm in the Caribbean or Mexico, wherever it might be over the course of the summer, or sitting on the deck of a cruise ship, that I am necessarily going to have a live internet question. But this is still an interactive program, so we'd like your questions, we'd like your comments. We also know it's Memorial Day weekend. Not a ton of people are watching live. But Sam Bailey, this has been a busy week for you. How are you holding up?
Well, I'm finally getting to sleep again, so I'm holding up a little bit better than I was Tuesday night. So that's
let's recap a little bit. We covered this on Wednesday's show. We're not going to talk about it too much, but at 7 Investing, we decided that as of July 7th, we are going to raise our prices. So right now, we charge $17 a month or $170 a year. And for that, you get access to all our amazing content. The problem is, in the past really 6 or 7 months, pretty much since I joined, though I'm not the catalyst for it, that's just kind of the inflection point, we started doing a lot more content for members. We started doing our members calls. We started doing deeper research. We have some things coming up that I'm not allowed to talk about that are amazing. So Sam, what is our new price and what are we doing for existing members or anybody who joins by the end of the day on July 6th?
So if you join, like Dan just said, before the end of the day on July 6th, you get to lock in our current rate, which is either $17 a month or $170 a year. We are grandfathering in every single subscriber that is currently has an active subscription. Once July 7th hits, our rate will increase to $49 a year or $390.
That would be
$49 a month or $399 a year.
And obviously, we want the people watching the show, the existing members, we hope you sign up, because that price, if you get in before July 6th, you will get our current price, our ridiculously low price for what we're offering. You're going to get that forever, as long as you maintain your membership. And we're not jerks. If your membership renews and your credit card is bad, we're going to shoot you an email. We're not going to make this super difficult. We've also announced an $84 a year subscription for students. So if you're actively a student, feel free to contact us about that subscription.
And the way that will work is if you have a .edu email address, it will automatically give you the $84 a year rate for 4 years. And if you are a high school student, you don't have a .edu, shoot us an email, info@7investing.com, and we can manually give you that rate.
This is big news. It's exciting. Feel free to shoot us your comments. Sam, thank you for joining me. I know it's hard to juggle 2 kids, and a kid could pop up at any time on this show.
Well, it was my mistake. I was trying to read the script and shouldn't have done that. I know what our new rate is. I know what our current rate is, so I should have just gone.
No, it is incorrect on the script. That is actually my fault. We're going to let Sam go back to being behind the scenes, and we're going to roll this amazing interview with our own Anirban Mahanti. We're talking Zscaler, we are talking internet security, and we are talking Ford and electric vehicles. I will see you in roughly 40 minutes.
Joining me once again is our very own Anirban Mahanti, or as our transcription service called him this morning, Honor-Bound Manatee, which sounds like some sort of Florida not very useful superhero, like a friend of Aquaman's who's not all that good. But Anirban, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Dan, for having me back. The transcription service has been great. It has called me all sorts of things, and I love them because it gives me all these different characters. It's called me Underbody Mahanti. It has also called me, strange enough, Obama Hunter. I'm not sure why.
Your last name was also
and
My Hot Tea on a couple of the ones I did.
so I would have thought that the AI would have learned by now, but it hasn't.
Yeah, which is odd because it actually got Manisha Sammy down pretty quickly. And because our very own Max Chatsko has 2 X's in his name, any other Max we have on, it assumes has 2 X's in its name. But that being said, I will give the folks at Otter credit. Transcription has come a really long way. The early days of transcription were absolutely dreadful. And I did one this morning where it was me talking to someone who had a distinctly different from my voice. And it was really good. All I had to do was add paragraphs. There was just very, very little work to it. But that is, of course, not what we are going to talk about. We are going to talk about Zscaler results. We're going to talk about Ford's plan to become the leader in electric vehicles. I'm going to have some questions about that. I'm not so sure you become the leader in a space that already has a leader. And we're also going to talk about the security industry in general. Before we kick off with Zscaler and getting into the nitty gritty, I'm not sure that's a company everyone knows. Can you give a little overview of what Zscaler does?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so Zscaler is basically a security company. It provides security solutions. It operates in a world known as zero trust. So the idea there is that you trust no one. You don't trust the person who's coming. So everybody needs to be authenticated before they can be trusted. And effectively, they run you think of it as a global cloud service. And you download this one piece of software that runs on your device, and that device then basically connects to Zscaler. Zscaler basically authenticates it, and then you sort of have access to internal applications or the internet. It's at a very simple level. You can think of it as like a global firewall that you've got that you're using. So enterprises, large companies, medium-sized companies, governments would be using Zscaler and similar services for all the obvious reasons, right? Lots of hacks happening, lots of cyber attacks happening. So these are sort of things that you need if you want to prevent those sort of things.
Yeah, you don't want the government going on a trust everyone system. I would argue that I'm too trusting. And yesterday I ended up accepting a Facebook request because sometimes people just know me from the show or from something on public I've done, and they want to be friends and whatever. Like I usually accept them. This was just someone randomly friending people on Facebook, and I spent 20 minutes answering questions. And so perhaps I should have a little less trust. But yes, when it comes to a website, no trust is a good idea. So I read these, and these seem like really good results for a young, growing company. What was your take on them?
Yeah, so revenue was up something like 60%. Which is phenomenal, right? And it's not, and this is not really that small, right? So revenue was somewhere around 175. I'm just 176 odd million. Again, thinking that number on the top of my head. You multiply that by 4, you're sort of closing in on a $600 million run rate, which is sort of their guidance is actually higher than that for the year. So you're growing at 60% at $500 million plus run rate. That's pretty significant. Then I think the other thing to look at is deferred revenue, how much revenue that they've got deferred that they're going to recognize. That's growing as well. So I think things are going well for them. They did a bunch of hiring. Really, what's important to realize here is that sales don't happen magically. Sales happen if you have salespeople who are actually advocating for your company. And it is strange, but even in today's world where everything is digital, enterprise, large companies just do not buy software because it's a good software, right? Somebody has to go out, convince them, or at least get on a Zoom call and convince them. And that's really what they did. So they've really worked on their go-to-market strategy. They got a new, last year, not in 2019, they got a president and a go-to-market president and chief revenue officer. And that has really helped. They've ramped up their hiring. They have got the right people on the ground. They've got the right people to make those decisions. And that's really paying off right now.
And I'll share with you a secret I learned from one of my interns. The best food is always on the sales floor. When I worked for Microsoft, they're generous with beverages everywhere. But if you go up to the sales floor, there's almost always a meeting that just ended, and there's snacks and bagels and who knows what else. So if you're working someplace and you want a snack, but I think we're actually going to see a lot more in-person salesmanship because you're not buying, these aren't cheap software packages. This isn't a $39 disc. These are large enterprise packages that can cost tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on your scale. Their deferred revenue was $225 million. That's about double. Well, not quite double. They were at $131 million in the year ago period. And they're estimating $660 million to $664 million in total sales. Do you think some of this is being driven, some of this quarter was driven by the Colonial Pipeline hijack, and sort of there's been a real added attention to our lack of security?
Yeah, so I think the SolarWinds attack that happened really probably got a lot of attention, right? Then the Colonial Pipeline attack was basically an asset attack, right? So I mean, that's a big deal. I did, this question was asked in the conference call, and actually what the CEO, Jay Chaudhary, said that, look, there's nothing specific that we can say or they can say that's because of Colonial Pipeline. But these things have been happening now, right? The SolarWinds attack, then this, then some malware. Then there is a lot of things that we don't hear about, right? There are things where companies' networks are completely hijacked, and then there's ransom that people have to pay to unlock the network or unlock, their IT infrastructure, often paid in Bitcoin, for example. So we don't hear a lot about those things, but there is an increased, heightened sense of among chief IT people who run the IT infrastructure, the chief scientific officer and things like that of organizations, that you need to invest in security, and you need to invest in security that works in today's era, which is where you can't really have, you have a mix of things. You have things running on your on-prem IT infrastructure. You have things running in the cloud. So you're really in a hybrid environment. Actually, the hybrid, because yes, you have people running things at home. Then you have IT infrastructure at your office infrastructure, and that might be distributed. And then you have IT infrastructure in the cloud. You really need to be prepared for that. So I think that is really the push. And all of these things in a strange way are helping, right? I mean, the more attacks happen, the more people become aware that, well, we need to invest for security. So
we're going to seg into talking about the broader security market in a second, but let's close out on Zscaler a little bit. This feels to me like they might as well be walking around with a for sale sign on. This seems unbelievably acquirable, and I think you'd want to acquire it when it's at the 650 million revenue range, not a year from now when it's likely at, I'm going to guess, 2 billion. That's projecting, and I'm not great at math, but somewhere in the much more than it costs now. So are there regulatory concerns here? Could a Microsoft or somebody come in and snap this up?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Let's look at the guidance, right? 660 million, and let's say they actually beat that. So they'll probably do 700 next year. They'll probably do, maybe 40% more of that. So they'll close in on $1 billion. The market capitalization for this company is about 20+ billion, right? A company like a Microsoft can acquire it, or another company can acquire it, right? Another big tech can acquire it. I think the two things to think about is, is this really a core area, right? And a few $100 million of revenue, $1 billion revenue really doesn't mean much for the big tech unless it is. I don't think big tech is a natural acquisition target or acquiree for this sort of company. There could be consolidation in this space for sure. I agree with the other complication is that the company was founded by Jay Chaudhary. He's a significant shareholder and a majority of, they hold, I think he and his family holds about 20% of the company, and they probably control 50% of the votes. So for the acquisition, this company has to come at a significant premium to where it is, which would be very pricey. So that's, I think, the negative in terms of, whether or not an acquisition can happen. So, I mean, the way I think about it, if you look at the security industry as a whole, you have this Zscaler, which is securing network and access and data. You have CrowdStrike, which secures the end devices. You have, other companies that are sort of doing something similar. Then you have traditional box providers, right? Basically gateway providers, firewall, physical boxes. These are provided by companies like Palo Alto Networks and Cisco Systems and things like that. So there's a lot of players, and I think consolidation could happen just to make it easier for everyone, right? But I would, if I had to bet on consolidation, I would say that it's likely to be one of those traditional big networking type companies that might want to acquire security solutions and not big tech. And I don't think this goes into antitrust or any of those sort of things, but I think this is just not big tech's arena.
You are watching 7 Investing Now. This segment was taped on Thursday afternoon. I'm sitting right now, as you see this, in the studio live. So if you have questions or comments you'd like to make, I'm going to take them when I finish talking with Anirban Mahanti. I know this is confusing because I'm wearing the same outfit in both segments. I really need like a different, like a gray shirt or a different background so we could see these sort of time jumps, but I'm not that creative. We did something pretty exciting yesterday at 7 Investing, Anirban. Simon Erickson came on 7 Investing Now and announced a long-standing plan, something we've been talking about very thoughtfully for quite a while, that we are going to, as of July 7th, raise our price. We're going to go to $49 a month, up from $17, or $3.99 a year. Obviously, it's a massive savings if you subscribe to the annual, but we are going to make sure that our existing members, if you were a member before July 7th, before the close of day on July 7th, you will be grandfathered at $17 a month or $170 a year. We're also offering a new annual subscription at $84 for students. So we want to keep everyone in the tent. We want to thank everyone for supporting us from the beginning, but we also want to be at a price that reflects that since those early $17 days, we've added you with the global perspective, with deep history as a research director. We've added me with a different take. There's no one really covering retail the way I cover retail. There's nobody that has that hands-on experience that's been out there buying commodities and is now talking about why lumber is expensive. We added Dana Abramovitz, Max Chatsko, covering the healthcare space and biotech like nobody else. We're doing more member updates. We're doing our calls with members, probably the most fun 90 minutes of the month, which you're not there. It's very, very late at night, but all the rest of us, we're going to do some that you can come to. But basically, we let the members ask us whatever they want about the picks. That's not something we do here on 7 Investing Now. So if you'd like to be a founding member, if you'd like to get in on the $17 a month for life, or $170 a year for life train, you can do that at 7investing.com/subscribe. The graphic's not going to pop up because I don't know how to do that here on Zoom, but that is 7investing.com/subscribe. Let's seg to the bigger security world. So here's how I view it. Let's take it from a consumer point of view first. You may not remember this one because you're not in the US, but Target had a pretty big credit card breach. And it impacted people because a lot of us got sent new debit cards and had to go through the hassle of like making sure your recurring payments are updated. Banks have actually gotten really a lot better at just doing that for you. I was surprised when I moved how many things just automatically updated and happened. But that being said, that one seemed to bother people. And then after they realized it wasn't a big hassle, the next like 200 data breaches, including Experian, which was an actual data breach of credit card info, nobody really cared. I think we're seeing in the internet world, a lot of these data breaches have been sort of esoteric from a regular point of view until we had Colonial Pipeline, where it was like, wait a minute, my buddy's wife in South Carolina had to go to 5 gas stations to get gas. Do you think the average person is now, going to their company and talking about security? I know it's come up with us at 7 Investing, though we're lucky that Max Chatsko has really been a strong advocate of us being safe for a long time.
Yeah, so I think, my sense is that I think individuals are more savvy about security now. There's just more news about, data breaches, privacy breaches, identity theft and things like that. It's just, I think you're right to say that the Colonial Pipeline basically hit people hard where it matters, in the sense that, I can't get gas into my vehicle. I can't actually travel. This is a big deal. And it really shows the ripple effect of, disruption, right? How one little hack, and this is this was the pipeline, right? What if the attack was on the electricity grid? You could actually black out large parts of the country by taking down the electricity grid, which then would have ripple effects on many other things, right? So I think that raises awareness. I would say, though, that the management at large companies probably were aware of these things for a long time. And security has never been, I think, put under the carpet. Like, companies have taken its security, whether it is, seriously, whether it is building perimeters and having, cameras, or to having actually securing the network. It is just that I think the attacks are becoming more and more sophisticated, and new holes are appearing in our perimeters that we have set up because of the way the world is changing. So there's things that we talked about, hybrid cloud, and people working from home. There's just more surface area through which the attack can happen. More connected devices means more surface area. So I think people who are managing these things realize that, and security is always, I look at security, it's like an arms race, right? You fix something, bad guys are going to figure out a way, or sometimes people actually not even necessarily bad people. It is for some people like a mark of honor to figure out, oh, I can hack stuff that they've just fixed, right? So it's an arms race. It's going to continue, but I would expect a lot more attention at the corporate level towards security, and I think, yeah, as you said, these are things I'm going to keep highlighting.
So you mentioned some of the players in the space: CrowdStrike, Zscaler, Okta would fit into that space as well. Is there a one-stop shop, or do I have to deal with multiple players if I'm a large enterprise organization?
Yes, so you could, each player would say that they're one-stop shop. Problem is that they're not. So you could, Zscaler could say that, well, look, you can come to me and I can actually solve all your security needs, but then they do partner with someone like, say, CrowdStrike. So the CrowdStrike secures the endpoints, and then you use Zscaler to secure your network and your data connections and your access to the internet and your access to the private network. So you do have to partner. Okta traditionally, Okta is not really, Okta is security, but it's a different type of security, right? It's more about identity, right? So Okta is dealing with identity, and Okta is not the only one dealing with identity. There's like Microsoft dealing with identity. There's Ping identity. There's so many other players. I don't think there's a one-stop way to solve this. It's just like, you can have a Mac, you can have a Windows PC, but then there are hundreds of you got hundreds of people making the Windows PC. In our markets are set up for competition. That means fragmentation by definition, and sometimes fragmentation is actually not good, but regulators love the fragmentation, and I guess consumers get some of the benefit. This is one of those industries where I think you're right. If we had just two placements, this is duopoly in some sense, I think we'd have much more secure networks and secure things, but unfortunately, that's not how it works.
Is it inevitable that we have more actual disruptive attacks? I mean, could we literally have planes falling out of the sky? I don't want to scare people too much, but the electric grid going down would end up in people dying. So is this just something that's like, we live in like Lex Luthor's world now? Like it's terrifying.
Yeah, so I think though there are solutions here, right? I mean, most critical infrastructure has backup. They have backups, right? So there's diesel generators, literally diesel generators out there. So if you think about the air traffic control, they have backup. They probably have like triple layers of backup, right? If this fails, then is that. They have alternative grid supply. So I think it's not. I think it's very disruptive, right? I mean, it's disruptive for people because if my power gets cut, like I can't cook because I don't have a gas connection at my place. So if my power is down for like 8 hours, and I can't use the microwave. So I can't turn on the heater, can't turn on the air conditioner. I wouldn't get hot water because again, I don't have gas. So it is very disruptive for people. And then, that chain, restaurants wouldn't be able to cook if they're using gas, the electricity. So I think that it's just a disruption, and we don't realize the disruption that much. I want to point out one thing. When I was living in India, blackouts are very common. You actually have staged, blackouts, because that's how the electricity grid copes with the extra load. So people have batteries at home, and then you just don't realize that the power went because you have batteries that do some of those things, provide backup electricity. Or some people have generators at home and things like that. So I think it's disruption, and but yeah, I mean, this is disruption caused by foreign actors, which is what makes it worse.
I live in South Florida, so we average 3 or 4 days a year with no power due to hurricanes. And I have a box that when the weather report comes out, I charge like 1 million phone chargers. I have one big battery that can charge my laptop a couple of times. At our previous house, my garage was like an open air parking garage. So I had a power inverter. So if I wanted to go charge my batteries and my other things in my car, I could go turn on the car. Here I have a 2-car enclosed garage that I don't think I'd want to open during a hurricane. So that's probably not as viable. But all of those solutions, lots of neighbors have generators. My building had generators to power the elevators and some very basic lights and functionality. But when it happens on an unplanned basis, storms don't sneak up on you. You're not getting a hurricane
Yes.
they didn't tell you about 3 days ago. It's when these things happen out of nowhere. Or I was in Connecticut when we had a very unexpected ice storm. We knew we were going to have bad weather, but it dipped just a few degrees and it became an ice storm. And it pulled down trees and the power grid. And we had no power for 9 days in the dead of winter. It was really, really difficult because it was cold. You couldn't, I actually did have gas water, so I could take a really luxurious shower. And then after that would have to bundle up. I've gotten totally off topic here. As an investor, how do you play this? It seems to me like there's a lot of quality in this space and there's going to be a lot of winners.
Yeah, look, like, I mean, there's, I think I always take, my personal take is a basket approach. And basket sounds like when I'm a dart thrower. In many ways, actually investing is like a bit like dart throwing. You just have to figure out which darts you want to throw, because that increases the odds of your success. So I look at quality companies in an area that has secular tailwinds. And I love that because when I say secular tailwinds, I think that the area is going to expand, it's going to grow quickly, it's modernizing something, it's providing a new type of service. It's taking data, technology, the cloud, and building the next gen of service. I think that's a very attractive space. And then in that, what you want to do is in that attractive space, which has got a big TAM, so total addressable market, you want to find the leaders. So you've already, if you want to invest in identity, well, Okta is one to consider. It's the leader in that space. You can look at Okta, you can look maybe the number 2, whichever is behind. These things tend to, work out in duopolies typically. The same thing with security. You can look at the best security solutions that are out there. There's a CrowdStrike I mentioned, Zscaler. These are, great companies growing quickly. And both of these companies, what is interesting about CrowdStrike and Zscaler is they're generating free cash flow. Both of these companies, plenty of free cash flow. So this is not like these companies are voodoo that are just growing by spending money. They're actually generating free cash flow. Their balance sheets are really strong. It's a good space to be in. They have very high margin business, right? Can they be disrupted? Yes, like everything can be disrupted, but as long as they're innovating, I think they're fine. So I think a basket approach works really well. Not everything has to work out, and you don't have to have 100% success rate, right? You could, in your basket, if 60% works out, but of the 60% that work out, those turn out to be multi-baggers, you'll do just fine.
We're going to seg into talking about Ford and its electric vehicle plans, but I mentioned Lex Luthor before because this does seem like the work of supervillains, and I will point out that Anirban wears glasses, and I've never seen him in the same room as Superman, so it is very possible. I don't know that those are real glasses. You could possibly be Australian Superman, a character I just made up. So Ford had this big announcement yesterday, and they said that they're going to have 40% of its vehicles by 2030 be electric. And my response to this is, of course you are. So will everybody. I don't know. I was very underwhelmed. I felt like this was stating the obvious. Is that how you took it? Did you see this as some big throwing down the gauntlet?
No. So this is like basically Ford realizing that if we don't make electric vehicles, we will not exist. So what's the best? So what's the best spin you can give? Well, we're going to lead the revolution. Well, you don't lead a revolution that is already being led by somebody else. So basically, this is, in my view, this is a spin on an acknowledgement that electric is the future. We need to make electric vehicles. And they're basically just announcing that. The key thing to note is they've just announced stuff and they've shown us prototypes. And they do make the Mach-E, which is the Mustang electric vehicle, Mustang battery electric vehicle, that hasn't sold very well, right? And maybe a Mustang is a niche vehicle. I mean, I think a Mustang, in my view, is for those people who love cars. The Mustang is an iconic vehicle, right? But it hasn't, blown away people with their sales. So this is,
Well,
I think,
let me jump in. Isn't the Mustang a car for people who like gas engines? Like, it feels to me that when you go all electric, your exception is going to be the Mustang and other muscle cars. Like, those are going to be novelties for people who like the. In fact, you might even see the engines revert from these modern computerized things to more like a 1980s, you can tinker with it engine. I feel like that's going to be a niche, the same way like selling albums to, I don't know, people who don't understand how music works and are really into albums. Like it feels like it was the wrong car to go electric with.
I think, Dan, I love that observation. That is actually spot on. So I think here is one problem I see. So I think what happened with the Mustang is exactly that. They took a safe car thinking, well, this is an iconic car that we have, maybe our iconic in the sense that, it's an expensive car. If you load up the Mustang, it costs a lot of money. At least here in Australia, it's like, it can add up easily to a $100,000 car. So they're going after that prestige customer. But the Mustang is an iconic car that has a certain view. Actually, as you are right, in the long run, this is the car that people want to buy, which has, a V15 or V16 engine, makes all these, ugly noises, almost sounds like a motorcycle. That is a car, and has a certain feel to it, and it has a special life for it. I think the same strategy seems to be playing with what they're doing with the F-150, which is America's most popular truck. I think the problem with this is the disruption problem. Most people being disrupted cannot take substantial step changes. They're not able to take those substantial step changes, right? So basically what we saw is that here is the F-150, how it looks. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the engine, put the engine on the wheels, put a battery pack underneath it, squeeze the battery pack, everything else stays the same. In other words, I do not reimagine the F-150 because I'm scared of reimagining the F-150. And I think that's the wrong strategy, because you're going to make the F-150 with gas. You're going to make the F-150 with all the limitations of the battery. None of the funkiness that come with battery, or, your customers are going to buy the gas cars and then you're going to be discounting your already expensive battery cars. And this is like a disaster in making, right? And they haven't said that they're going to close down. Had they said that we're going to not make any F-150, that's going to be an internal combustion engine, that was a different story. But they're not doing that. So I think they're setting themselves up for failure. This is not a popular opinion, but I think they're setting themselves up for failure.
I think you're right. There's three distinct types of F-150 buyers. There's the small-time working contractor, plumber, person who needs a truck for work purposes, and that person might be sold on electric if the long-term costs are cheaper. It's a person who's probably pretty tuned in with business. Then there's I'll call them the Florida show-off F-150 owner. It's a truck that's never seen a day's work in its life. It's pristine. It has exactly the bumper stickers you'd think it would. And that person is going to want a loud gas engine. You drive a Tesla, I drive a Prius. There is nothing impressive about the meep meep of my engine and the non-sound of your engine. But there's a third buyer for the F-150, and this is where I really think they dropped the ball when they could have reimagined it. This is a corporate workhorse of a truck. every company using pickup trucks to move stuff around. My family business, de rigueur, at every location probably has 2 F-150s to do little fill-in scaffolding deliveries. And that's one where I really think they could have been inventive. They could have come up with some really cool technology. And it does feel like they're basically saying, same car, slightly different engine. No one will know. Like, if you buy an electric one, we'll give you a tape recording of the sounds. Like, I don't know. This seems to me like kind of the worst of old world thinking.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what was my feeling is, and I think there's a couple of other things that's going to actually play out here, right? So they're making the right moves for survival. This is a typical problem because their bread and butter is the internal combustion engine line of vehicles, right? So they can't really drop it. And it is these, if you think about the factories for making EVs, these are completely different. You have to make the battery. So there's the issue of finding battery. They don't have a battery cost advantage. They don't have a battery cost disadvantage because of their scale. They're just starting now. They're technologically going to be at least 5 years behind in the battery game. They don't have the charging network like someone else does. So they have a lot of disadvantages that they're working with. And they're running this parallel show. So, again, I don't know if I was, if I was running Ford, I would take the gambit and say, okay, this vehicle is only going to be electric. And to make the electric successful, I'm going to build my own charging network. And I'm going to go all in and build the best, the powertrain for electric and get you the best. What's going to happen now is that they're going to have mediocre range at an expensive price point. and then you will not be able to charge it because you have to go to a third-party charger. And when you arrive at the third-party charger, you're going to discover that it's actually not working, right? These are small things that actually are going to matter because, when you drive the car, you should be able to have the range you need. If you show up at a third-party charger and it is dead, you're a host because you've got now no range left in your vehicle. So I think these are sort of things that they should have really thought about, which they haven't. So I don't know.
So I'm going to throw out a weird comparison. Walmart. So Walmart a few years ago paid $4 billion for Jet.com. And basically they paid all that money to hire Mark Lowry. And Mark Lowry said, you can't just put Band-Aids on. You can't just do little fixes. You have to absolutely re-engineer the entire supply chain. And that was a very painful, expensive decision to make. And even Mark Lowry didn't survive. He's still a consultant to the company, but basically every person who worked under him, Jet.com was dismantled, but Walmart got where it needed to go, which is not typical. Companies that size do not normally pivot like that. That's the lesson here for Ford. There is a roadmap to building those batteries. It's just not a fun one. It's one that involves right now saying we're going to make those investments. So let me ask a question on the chargers. I live in Florida. There's a lot of travel here. There's there's the Florida Turnpike, which is a toll road, and all of the rest stops there are getting one section of Tesla chargers and one section of the other charger. Is the other charger inferior in terms of the batteries it can power and the range it can provide?
So there's a range of problems with the other chargers. So the number one problem is that the other chargers are made by various other companies, right? They use various other technologies. So they don't have, they're probably behind in terms of how quickly they can charge. But let's say you don't even care about that. I think just the APIs talking is just lacking. You could drive a Volkswagen ID and drop it down to 50 miles. So then you arrive and see, this charger I thought should be working is actually not working, or all the charging stations are taken. These are small things, but they are very difficult to solve again because regulators love competition, right? They don't want Tesla to own the charging network, but this is exactly what happens when you have charging networks run by 10 different people, hundreds of different people, with hundreds of different software, then talking to hundreds of different vehicle companies, right? It is just chaos. So I think it's not that they're inferior. I think it's just the disparity and the heterogeneity of the availability of these things that makes it really, really crazy, right? And it's just not optimized. It's very hard to optimize travel. So I think that's that. And I do think, I think with the battery, the simplest way to think about batteries is for each dollar that you're paying for the kilowatt or kilowatt hour, you can either pay less for 1 kilowatt hour, or for the same price, you can get more battery and therefore more range, right? And that's a fundamental disadvantage you have if you don't have the battery scale that Tesla has. I think that's the problem that, that's a very difficult problem to circumvent. You just have to work at it. So I think, those two things add up, and it's a cost disadvantage.
Let me throw out sort of an innovative thought. This will be our last topic here. So we're focused on the chargers and the stations. Is it possible to engineer a replaceable battery where I just pull into the rest stop, go to the kiosk, and a guy takes my battery and gives me a new one? Are there other models? Because I'm not sure as a country we have the room for 4 or 5 different charging networks. Like it feels to me like if Ford wants to do this, they've already lost out on the Florida Turnpike. They're not going to add more charging stations to their existing planned for 5-year re-engineered charging stations. It almost feels like they just have to do it a different way.
Yeah, so I think, what I'm talking about is the interim, right? So I think what happens is our human tendency is to think the steady state long term. I think over the long term, every vehicle is going to be electric. And yes, 100% of vehicles would not be Tesla. But what the future looks like may be that there is Tesla and some other companies like Rivian and maybe no Ford. That could be the future. In the future, every gas station is actually an electric power plant, which will provide electricity, and everything will work seamlessly. And there'll be plenty of supply that that you could arrive at a station, and if one supply is not working, you'll have multiple points. Just like, you can find that, one of the gas delivery pipes are not working, but you can just go on to the next slot because, there's plenty. So I think that's the future. It's just how do you get to that future is the problem. So I think in the long run, all those things will work out. So I think that's not going to be the problem. But I think it's the intermediate, how do you get Ford people to actually buy electric vehicles in the interim, these next 10 years, right? This 10 years is the transition, is the big question. And what's your strategy around that? Because you have to live through those 10 years, right? And unlike a company like Walmart, which had, I think, a substantially more powerful business, right? It's a retailer, but it's one damn good retailer. There are very few damn good retailers out there.
Walmart probably could have stayed the course and been okay. They wouldn't have been successful to the level they're successful, but with their customer base, their brick and mortar is going to matter more than it's like Dollar General. Dollar General doesn't need an online presence because their customers all live within 3/4 of a mile of the store. But Walmart exponentially grew the value of its business by having that. Let's close out with, you mentioned, what if there's no Ford? Do you expect that we're actually going to see some of these grand old names either disappear or become functionally nameplates, different companies where, maybe, I think that Fisker, I think that's who opened near me, a showroom. It used to be a pizza place. Now it is an electric car showroom. Might you see like a Ford end up property of Tesla?
No, so I think some of these are going to disappear, is my take. That's typically what happens, or they will be very different from what you see them as today, as they are. That's my take. Because I think the couple of problems that's going on, right? People will say that a company like Ford or GM is a manufacturing powerhouse. My thing is that they are a manufacturing powerhouse of the 19th and 20th century. They're not the manufacturing powerhouse of the 21st century. In fact, to get to the 21st century manufacturing powerhouse, they have to write down a lot of the assets they actually got. A lot of the assets are actually basically big liabilities that they have to get rid of. So my forecast would be that I would expect some big internal combustion engine manufacturers to actually have huge asset write-downs. I think this is not people are not talking about. The other thing that people are not talking about is many of these car companies are actually also vehicle financing companies, right? So these companies, technically have 2 types of debt. They have debt for their vehicle operations and the plant, debt against plants and equipment that they have. They also have debt against vehicles that they're financed, right? So if you look at Ford will look like $120 billion of debt, right? Because not all of that debt is Ford debt. It's actually financed debt. as the years progress, many of these assets are actually not going to be assets, they're going to be liabilities. You'll have to write those down. So I think there are some very interesting things that are likely to happen. This is when an industry changes and when there is a turmoil in an industry, this is like disruption post that sort of, pivot point or post the point at which there is a takeoff in another alternative technology. A lot of things happen and it's not good for the incumbents. Unfortunately, it's never good for the incumbents because they're late and they have all these liabilities that, Ford, GM and many others have some very troubling years ahead, right? We'll see what happens.
I will share one last story quickly here as we close up. I don't know if you know this brand. It was an American-only brand, Saturn. So one of the first
I know Saturn.
One of the first adult purchases I made is I bought a 1-year-old Saturn after driving my previous car into the ground. And I bought the car on a Wednesday and I went back on Thursday because there was something wrong with one of the tires. And not only was my Saturn dealer gone, Saturn was gone. Nobody had mentioned to me when I was buying the car. They must have known. Literally less than 24 hours later, the entire company had closed with a vague pledge that they were going to make parts available. That was not true. Fortunately, I had a friend who was a mechanic and he would scour the dumps for me to find pieces when my windshield wipers broke. He found me a motor. It was impossible. I ended up with a car that was a pretty well rated car that became really difficult to repair. That was also the last car I ever owned that had crank windows. I've since come up in the world to the power windows. Anirban Mahanti, thank you for doing this. I'm going to throw back to me and Sam Bailey to hit our finisher.
Very strange, Sam, to be coming back to myself. As I've said before, I need to vary up the wardrobe. I need to get a couple of colored shirts. Maybe when I'm doing some of these shows from remote places, I'll borrow something from my friend Danny Venna and start wearing Hawaiian shirts. No, you don't want to be a guy who could lose some weight in a Hawaiian shirt. That is not a good look. Sam is sticking around for our finisher, but I want to hit a couple of comments here. I'll just share one verbally. Patrick Ford said, Anirban, shouldn't you be sleeping? Yes, he is sleeping. I mean, we can't verify that he's sleeping. He might be up watching television or something, but it is the middle of night in Australia. We're going to tape with Anirban pretty regularly because I thought from a production point of view, that worked really well. I'm going to take a comment from D here. Proof is in the pudding. It's that one, Sam. Proof is in the pudding. Pudding is the drivetrain efficiency. I've never heard of a drivetrain referred to as pudding. Mustang Mach-E costs 40% more to charge per mile, despite being the same weight and price range. Yeah, one thing I learned from Anirban here is there is a massive advantage that Tesla and the pure electric companies have. They're really in a situation where they're so far ahead. And Sam, I don't know if you've ever been to a Ford factory. I have. It doesn't look like a Tesla factory. And I ran a factory. It's one thing if you're switching from making something that's 12-foot. I used to make scaffolding planks. You're switching from 12-foot planks to 10-foot planks. You just have to move some tooling around. Switching from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles is a massive, massive switch. We've got some really nice comments I want to close out with before we hit our finisher. Martha Berry West, a regular viewer, a Facebook friend of mine, says, thank you guys for the work you do. I love the show and love watching. Honestly, it's a holiday weekend. I mean, we love that comment, but we appreciate that anyone's watching. We fully knew 12 o'clock on a holiday weekend is not a great time. Sam, I'll ask you before we get to our finisher here. We're going to share one more comment. I'm leaving after the show, or at least when my son gets home from school. Immediately after the show, I'm going to my trainer. But after a shower and after that, I am driving up to our new vacation condo in Orlando. Are you doing anything this weekend to celebrate? I know Memorial Day is a weird one to celebrate, but to enjoy the 3-day weekend.
No, and that is so disappointing. We actually we were going to go to Mexico and my son's passport didn't get here in time. We found a last minute trip and it didn't work out. So I'm trying to get him.
I had similar issues taking my son on a cruise where you don't technically need a passport, but it's a lot easier that it arrived the day before. And I am so protective. My passport and my vaccine card are both in highly, highly protected places. Daniel Delgado has a great comment as well. I agree, Martha. I get so much valuable information here. We try. I love having Anirban on. Everyone on the team is smart. Anirban is brilliant and has just a different take of things. Everybody, I'll be honest, everybody on the team makes me see things differently. So it's one of those scenarios where, where I might go into something thinking one way, like it seems impossible to me that Ford might not exist. And now I think, oh, wait a minute, like it's very plausible that Ford won't exist because maybe they cannot make a comparable vehicle to the Tesla. And if people don't want a digital F-150, and I don't think people want an all-electric F-150, they're going to struggle mightily. But Sam, you're joining me here for the finisher. We'd love your feedback, your comments on the show. You're welcome to hit me up at Worst Ideas 7, because obviously this is not the typical fully interactive live show. I hope that as we keep doing these, that people just ask questions as we go. Some of them we might break up, where I do an opening, play a recorded piece, take some questions, play another recorded piece. We are playing with our technology as the world opens up, and I am so excited for all the ridiculous places you're going to see me. I guarantee there will be multiple hotel lobbies and Starbucks hosting this show going forward. You'll see me live from Money Show in early June. We'll promote those dates. I'm doing a live conference. I'm speaking on retail, and I had to throw out about half my speech because now I want to speak about supply chain so people can get over the idea of what inflation is. A shortage of something, making it cost more, is not inflation. But Sam, let's hit our finisher here. Which of these do you plan to do this summer? About 35% said fly in a plane. That just beat out none of the above. 21% said stay in a hotel. Only about 8.5% said visit a theme park. In my world, living in South Florida, I'm guessing that number for theme park would be much higher. Sam, I'm going to do all of these things. In fact, I've already done all of these things. I'm also going to add get on a cruise ship. That who knows what happens from the U.S., though I do expect good news there. But I'm definitely cruising out of the Bahamas in August. I will be in a casino. I will be, I don't know, a live concert, I hope, maybe a sporting event. Sam, are you going to do any of those three things this summer?
We are doing all of those things. Just this morning, my husband was unloading the groceries, and on the Coke 12 pack, there's 50% off for Six Flags. So just this morning, hey, you want to go to Six Flags? Sure do. Great timing. So yeah, anywhere that's not Houston, Texas, I plan on being there.
Yeah, I've been to Disney and Universal Studios during the pandemic. My son and I went to H2O Live, which is a relatively small Orlando area water park in front of the Margarita Hotel and Resort Complex. There aren't too many places. There aren't too many people. I'll be visiting Texas. I fully expect I'll be visiting our friends in Alexandria, Virginia. I'll be visiting my family in New England, maybe. Not so sure about that one. I'll be seeing my mother when she comes to visit me. With that, it is a holiday weekend. We appreciate your indulgence. I hope you enjoyed having Sam on the show. Sam, I hope you like doing it. I know we pressed you into service a little bit here.
No, I loved it. I was just thinking when you're in all these tropical locations, be Dan Kline happy in Mexico and Sam Bailey sad in Houston. So maybe I can join you on one of those cruises.
Yeah, Daniel Delgado, I might go to Sugarland, Texas. And yes, just to clarify, Sam and I have talked about her family joining me.
Yes. Not just Dan and I.
Yes. Now, that being said, we're both adults. That would be fine. But I am very much looking forward to, because you have my favorite type of kids. Other people's kids. There's nothing better. It's like when your neighbor has a dog and you can get all the joy of playing with the dog and none of the bad parts of dealing with the dog. So there will absolutely be travels with various members of the 7 Investing team, various
families
and their families. Well, to be fair, Max and I have a trip booked that's just going to be Max and I, but that's probably a little more socially acceptable.
Not as much of an HR violation of the department I also run, technically.
That being said, if Sam and I went to a trade show or something, that would be perfectly acceptable. But very much looking forward to the family travel. My wife doesn't travel that much, as we've talked about on this show, so it tends to just be me, or sometimes me and my son. With that, we are heading out soon on a holiday weekend, or at least I am. We thank you for watching. We thank you for the indulgence. We thank you for taking the time to get to know us. I'm not a big fan of being a nameless, faceless head. I want people to know what empowers what I'm doing, and the fact that you know that I love to travel and then I don't own a lot of travel stocks, that probably tells you quite a bit about how I feel about the travel industry. So I liken this show to a little bit like Law and Order. They don't belabor the personal on Law and Order, but after 10 years, you start to know that Ice-T was estranged from his son and is divorced, and and you figure out, you start to get little bits of it and learn who the people are. It makes the show better. If you'd like to get in touch with us, that is info@7investing.com. Please, right now, only if it's a question you really need the answer to. Poor Steve Symington, with the price change, has been inundated with, which I would say, 999 out of 1,000 amazing questions and comments. A lot of people looking to take their monthly and turn it into an annual, which is actually pretty easy to do on the site, but it's also easy to miss. A lot of people looking after our new student subscription. So we're getting buried in email. But if you have questions, Boris, it might not be as lightning fast as it normally is. And if you want to get to us quickly, @7investing on Twitter. You can send us a private message there. I saw some today for Simon. He'll go in and answer those at some point. If it's a general one for the team, it could be me, it could be Sam, it could be anybody answering. Probably be a little quieter than normal on Twitter this weekend. Enjoy your holiday. We will see you with a blockbuster show on Monday. Sam Bailey, in front of the glass. Thank you. We'll see you Monday.